Welcome to the Great Plains Housing Authority's Housing Choice Voucher Program initial briefing video. Let us take a quick moment to ask a few important questions. Do you speak another language and need an interpreter? Do you need sign language, closed captioning, or written version of this briefing? Do you need any reasonable accommodations to complete this briefing? Do you need a caseworker, payee, guardian, or others to attend the briefing? Do you need GPHA to contact them after this briefing? As you can imagine, there is valuable information that I would like to share with you so that you can be well informed on how the voucher program works. The tools that you will need to become a successful participant are in your packet provided to you by the Housing Authority. In addition, you should have a piece of paper and a pen available so that you can write down any questions you may have. It is important for you to understand the information that we will be covering today. Great Plains Housing Authority's jurisdiction is Dickey, Eddy, Foster, Logan, Sargent, Stutzman, and Wells counties in North Dakota. To receive assistance, participants must reside in units within the counties served. GPHA has a zero-tolerance policy. Housing Authority staff will not tolerate any physical, written, or verbal abuse from participants. If an employee feels threatened by a participant, they will terminate the participant's assistance or briefing immediately. This is in accordance with HUD regulations. Coercion, bribery, harassment, intimidation, and other threatening behavior towards PHA personnel may cause termination of assistance or application. The Housing Authority follows strict guidelines and does not tolerate those behaviors. The Housing Authority may terminate an application or assistance if the client intentionally misrepresents their household, assets, income, or other information. HUD's programs are in place to help households in need support quality, safe, affordable housing and promote self-sufficiency. Congress allocates funding to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, who contracts with the local housing authority. GPHA offers 3 types of housing vouchers. HCV or Housing Choice Vouchers. This voucher allows clients to search for qualified housing in the general market using program guidelines. Mainstream Vouchers. This is a special voucher type only for those who are permanently disabled and under the age 62. Participants must meet certain HUD requirements to qualify. Project-based vouchers. These are vouchers contracted to a specific building. These vouchers support participants. However, the project-based voucher cannot move to other units. The voucher program allows you as a participant to find a housing unit in the private market and receive a subsidy on that unit from the Housing Authority to make it affordable. The voucher program is a partnership between you as a tenant, the landlord, the Housing Authority, and the federal government. All parts of the partnership must meet their obligations for housing assistance to work. Let us go through some terms the Housing Authority and HUD use. HUD, or the Housing and Urban Development, is a cabinet department within the United States federal government. HUD allocates funding and creates policies for the PHA. Congress appropriates funding to HUD for the voucher program and creates certain rules. Affordable housing is when the tenant is paying no more than 30% of their household income toward the total household costs, including utilities. The Housing Authority will review any deductions or exclusions that apply. When assistance is calculated, 30% of your adjusted income will go towards the payment of your rent and utilities. For example, if you have $1,000 a month in income, you will pay $300 to your landlord and utility providers. And the Housing Authority will pay the remaining balance to the landlord up to the payment standard. HUD requires housing authorities to use gross income from paychecks, Social Security, and other income types. TTP, or Total Tenant Payment, or Tenant Payment, is the amount of money that you will be responsible for toward the cost of your rent and utilities. For the PHA to make the determination of what you will be paying for rent, the PHA must consider items such as your income, your household size, eligible deductions or income exceptions. HAP or Housing Assistance Payment. This is the payment made by the housing authority directly to the landlord on behalf of the tenant. The admin plan or administrative plan is the housing authority's policies and procedural manual for the voucher program. The admin plan is available to the public and posted on GPHA's website. The admin plan is a living document. This means policies may change for a variety of reasons. There are several waivers available for qualifying participants. Participants must demonstrate reasoning and proof for the waiver. Waivers include reasonable accommodation, minimum rent, medical deduction hardship changes, work requirement, zero income. Payment standards. Participants should lease under the payment standard to qualify. This is not a benefit amount. This is the maximum rent plus utility level allowed by HUD. Utility allowance. The amount that the housing authority determines is the average expense of the household's reasonable utility costs to maintain the unit. The housing authority can only include utilities that are tenant responsibility under the lease agreement and that are required to sustain the unit. The utility allowance may include heating and cooling, water heating, electricity, water, sewer, and garbage. Cell phone, internet, renter's insurance, cable TV, streaming services, and other fees are not utilities and are considered the tenant responsibility. Utility allowance is not a benefit amount or program. Housing inspections. After you have chosen and received landlord approval to rent a unit, it will be necessary for the housing authority to conduct a physical inspection of the housing unit to make sure that it is a safe place for you to live. The things the inspector will be looking for are operable smoke detectors, windows and doors that lock, electrical and plumbing issues, exhaust fans, condition of the painted surfaces, and many other items. All items in the housing unit must function properly. The unit must pass an inspection before you receive assistance. 2 months prior to your anniversary date, the housing authority will conduct an annual inspection. Annual recertification. Each year on the anniversary date of your assistance, you will be required to recertify your income and household composition. You will receive a letter from the housing authority informing you of your upcoming certification 60 to 90 days prior to the due date. It is important to keep these appointments to retain your assistance. Failure to complete the certification, an annual inspection will result in termination. Interim recertification. If your income or household composition should change, it is necessary to inform the housing authority of the changes that have taken place in your household. It is always better to keep the housing authority informed and remain program compliant. Term of assistance. This is the length of time a person qualifies for assistance. A household is eligible to stay on the program as long as they receive a housing assistance payment of a minimum of $1 from the housing authority and remains program compliant. There is no time limit on how long you can receive housing assistance. If you become self-sufficient, in which you no longer need help from the housing authority and are paying your own rent, there is a 6-month grace period that allows households to remain on the program while receiving no assistance. If after the 6 months are up and you no longer need housing assistance, you are then determined to be self-sufficient and issued a program termination notice. However, if for any reason within those 6 months your income changes, you may submit verification to be reactivated in the HAP payment system. It is important to understand, to keep this provision in place, you cannot move during the 6-month grace period. HUD and the Housing Authority's goal is to help participants achieve self-sufficiency while assisting vulnerable qualified households. Lease. Lease is the legal contract signed between you as the tenant and the landlord. The Housing Authority is not part of the lease. The lease should include all household members, the address, start date, end date, security deposit, rent amount, utilities, and other details. Make sure to read the lease and understand your obligations as a tenant in that unit. Additional month-to-month fees above the base rent costs are the tenant's responsibility. Renter's insurance, landlord liability, and other fees are the tenant's responsibility and not the housing authority's. The housing authority does not settle or mitigate any lease disputes between landlords and tenants. Great Plains Housing Authority has a cutoff date of the 20th of the month to report any changes for the next month. Providing pay stubs and other changes by the 20th allows the Housing Authority time to process changes and provide proper notices. The voucher program is an income-based program. You must report all income to the Housing Authority. A portion of your income must go towards your rent and utilities. Failure to pay your portion violates the program and may be cause for eviction and program termination. What is income? Any employment or self-employment, social security, retirement funds, unemployment, child support, spousal support, contributions from others, such as cash and in-kind help, TANF, income from assets, and other regular funds received by the client. Deposits from Cash App, Zelle, PayPal, Chime, and financial accounts are income. Participants should contact the Housing Authority if they have questions. What is an asset? Assets can be any checking or savings accounts, trusts, real estate, investments, life insurance policies, and other financial accounts. Cash App, Zelle, PayPal, Chime, and other online accounts are electronic assets and must be reported. Participants must present full statements covering 2 months. The Housing Authority may request up to 2 years of any asset statements. It is important that participants report all income, as HUD may require participants to repay assistance if underreporting. Reminder, it is fraud if a participant purposely provides false information to the Housing Authority. Voucher. This is an important document. This form gives you the ability to go out into the private market, rent a housing unit, and receive housing assistance within your voucher size and correct payment standard. The voucher has a time frame in order to receive housing assistance. You must find a suitable unit and get the appropriate paperwork completed within that time frame. If you are getting close to the expiration date and still cannot find a unit, contact the Housing Authority immediately. There may be an extension that they can grant you on a case-by-case basis. The voucher serves as a source of income to afford a housing unit. There are important items to note on the voucher. The voucher will have your name, the Housing Authority's name, the voucher will have the issue date and expiration, and the voucher will have a unit size, which is based on your household size. Participant obligations include: provide all documents the Housing Authority requests, abide by the Housing Authority and landlord policies, allow the Housing Authority to inspect the unit annually, promptly inform the Housing Authority of any income or household changes, inform the Housing Authority of any absence from the unit, notify the Housing Authority of any visitors, pay all utilities and the tenant's rent portion on time. Please read your tenant packet and ask any questions of the Housing Authority staff. Request for tenancy approval. Once you have found the housing unit that you wish to rent, you must complete the request for tenancy packet. This packet needs to be completed between the tenant and the landlord. It may be helpful to complete it together, as each party needs to sign various documents. The form includes the address, when you plan to move in, number of bedrooms, amount of rent to be charged, security deposit required, and who is responsible to pay for which utilities. Once you have completed this packet, bring it to the Housing Authority immediately, along with an unsigned lease. This completed packet authorizes the Housing Authority to conduct the inspection. A good place to live. This is a brief booklet of the items that your housing inspector will be looking for when they conduct an inspection on the place you choose to rent. It is a good idea to make yourself familiar with these items, as the Housing Authority will not allow you to lease a housing unit with assistance that does not pass these guidelines. Lead-based paint information. If you rent a home that was built prior to 1978, you must be informed that it could contain lead-based paint. HUD is taking the business of lead-based paint very seriously because it can pose serious health hazards to humans and in particular children. GPHA advises all households about the dangers of lead-based paint dust by providing a brochure in your initial packet. There is a form in the request for tenant packet which you will sign to indicate that you have been informed about the dangers of lead-based paint and that you have been supplied with the appropriate brochure. North Dakota Department of Environmental Quality and Public Health Departments help provide guidance on lead-based paint. Authorization for the Releases of Information and Privacy Act notice. You are required to sign these forms. HUD's release of information authorizes HUD and the Housing Authority to use your information within their systems and verify limited information. GPHA's release of information allows the agency to request certain information to provide assistance. North Dakota Health and Human Services have separate releases of information to verify ND/DHHS economic assistance benefits. Each member of your household over the age of 18 must sign. Adding household members. The voucher policy states that no person other than those listed on the lease shall live or stay in the unit without the housing authorities and the landlord's prior approval. All income and assets of any new members will count for housing assistance. Should you wish to add new household members, a new application for addition to household will need to be completed. The housing authority and landlord must review any new household member's criminal background. The option of portability. After you have satisfied certain provisions of the program, the Housing Authority can transfer the voucher anywhere in the United States where assistance is available. Portability makes it possible to move and retain assistance. Portability is only available to Housing Choice Vouchers and Mainstream Vouchers participants. If you think that you may be interested in porting your assistance to another housing authority, please let your housing authority know. Participants must provide a 60-day notice to use portability. It is important to know that you must be in good standing with the current housing authority and landlord to move or port. Great Plains Housing Authority requires that participants live in the jurisdiction for at least 1 year prior to using portability. Administrative review and informal hearing. Participants may request a review if you disagree with an action made by the housing authority that affects your household. An administrative review must be completed before requesting an informal hearing. An informal hearing can be requested upon termination of assistance if the tenant disagrees with the decision. After receiving a request for a hearing in writing, the housing authority may schedule a meeting with a neutral party to mediate. This would be an opportunity for both the housing authority and the participant to present their case. This is not a legal court proceeding. Even though this is an informal process, you may have an attorney present with you if you wish. It is important to note that the housing authority will not resolve landlord-tenant disputes or lease violations. Fair housing. There are many fair housing brochures in your packet. If the tenant or any member of the household has reason to believe that it has been discriminated against, the tenant may file a housing discrimination complaint. High Plains Fair Housing Center and the North Dakota Department of Labor Human Rights Division have the authority to investigate fair housing issues. In North Dakota, landlords cannot deny you a rental based solely on that you are a voucher holder. Landlords may have other screening requirements, and it is best that you ask about screening measures before applying for a unit. Understanding the lease. A lease is a legal agreement between the landlord and tenant. The housing authority is not a party on the lease. Tenants must abide by all items in the lease. The landlord is the owner or manager of the property. The tenant is the person who rents the property. The property manager or landlord is the person in charge of the property. Make sure your name is clear and correctly reported on the lease. The lease should clearly define the monthly rent as well as when rent payments are due. The lease may identify any additional fees or agreements required by the landlord separate from the base rent. It is important to understand the penalties for late payments, as they may range from a small penalty fee to an eviction. This should be identified on your lease. In case a problem or dispute arises between you and your landlord, the court is going to uphold what is written on the lease. Do not enter into any side agreements. Understand who is responsible for the utilities for the property and identify where it is noted on the lease as well as what businesses to contact. The security deposit for most leases is equal to the first month's rent. This amount is determined by the landlord. The lease needs to contain provisions that address when a landlord is allowed to keep a deposit. The housing authority can terminate assistance to participants due to an eviction from a lease violation. Great Plains Housing Authority has a policy on allowed time away from the unit. Households must notify the housing authority and landlord if you will be away from the unit for 30 days. The housing authority and landlord may terminate any agreements if the participant is away for more than 30 days. The housing authority has restrictions on visitors to prevent lease and program violations. Participants can have a visitor stay up to 10 days. After that, the visitor should apply to be added to the program or vacate. Participants should not allow others to live or stay at the unit who are not part of the program and lease agreement. These are the housing authority policies. Your lease may have other policies which need to be followed. Participants are not allowed to sublet their unit to anyone else. There are several items we need to review to help you become a successful participant in the voucher program. Complete the initial briefing and receive the necessary forms from the housing authority. Go out into the private market and find a suitable rental unit. Remember, the things you should consider when looking for a place to live include the condition of the unit, whether the rent is reasonable and within the payment standard, the cost of any tenant-paid utilities, the location of the unit, the proximity to public transportation, centers of employment, schools, and shopping, if the landlord is willing to participate in the voucher program. Complete the form request for tenancy approval packet with the landlord once you have identified the unit you would like to rent. Return the packet with an unsigned lease to the Housing Authority office. The Housing Authority will review the packet and lease and determine unit eligibility. The Housing Authority will set up a time for the housing inspection with the landlord. An inspection may take 1 to 2 weeks to schedule. If the housing unit does not pass the initial inspection, the Housing Authority will inform the landlord of what repairs must be made to qualify. The landlord may make the repairs immediately, at which point the unit can be approved. Or the landlord may make the repairs within 30 days. Or the landlord may decide that they do not want to make the repairs, at which point in time you must resume your search for a suitable housing unit. If the housing unit passes inspection, your housing authority representative will give you approval to sign a lease. In most cases, an initial 12-month lease is required for all new move-ins. At this time, the landlord and tenant can sign the lease. The housing authority will make a final rent determination and create a housing assistance contract with the landlord. Rental assistance cannot start until the participant resides in the unit with a passing inspection. The housing authority will inform you what you will pay for rent. Remember, your portion of the rent is paid to the landlord, not to the housing authority. The tenant must pay for any identified utilities to the respective utility providers. Non-rent or utility items are not covered by HUD funding and are the tenant's responsibility. Remember to review and understand your lease financial obligations. This includes garage rentals, landlord liability, renter's insurance, utility fees, and other items in the lease. If the participant goes on a month-to-month lease that has an extra charge, the participant owes the cost over the base rent. For example, if a landlord offers a month-to-month lease that is $50 more per month versus a 12-month lease, the participant owes the $50 in addition to their original portion. 60 to 90 days prior to the anniversary date of your assistance, the Housing Authority will contact you to recertify your income, assets, household composition, and conduct an inspection. Be sure to respond to this request for information promptly to retain your housing assistance. All participants should be good tenants and neighbors. Do not be disruptive to your neighbors or cause damage to the unit or complex. If you damage the unit, you are responsible for the costs, and that will result in voucher termination and possible ban from the program. If your income or household composition should change, contact your housing authority immediately and submit necessary verifications. It is the participant's responsibility to provide income, asset, deduction, and household information. Participants can report information by bringing it to one of our offices, email, mail, or upload documents using our secure website. Great Plains Housing Authority's website contains this video, additional resources, program policies, updates, disability web assistance, and secure upload features. The website is https://www.greatplainsha.com. Always check your local housing authority's policies. If you have questions, be sure to ask them how to prevent any adverse actions. This concludes our initial briefing video. Remember to be a successful participant in the voucher program. Communication is extremely important. If you have questions, feel free to contact the Housing Authority.